As you board, please move across your car to make room for everyone, and kindly offer available seating to those needing special assistance. If you're standing, please hold on to the handrails and stay clear of the doors. They will be closing in a moment. Thank you.
Hey, howdy, hey, and welcome to another episode of Disney Assembled. I'm Troy.
And I'm Mimi.
And we are your happy little father-daughter podcast, here to create joy and share our love for all things Disney.
Disney Assembled is sponsored by our patrons over on Patreon, Brenda, Danny, Connie, and Andrew.
Yes, thank you guys very much. We really appreciate your support. If you would like to help support the show by joining our Patreon member family, head on over to patreon.com/DisneyAssembled. You can also go to our website, DisneyAssembled.com, and hit the Become a Patron button. Membership starts as little as $2 a month, 50 cents a week. And for that, you get access to all the exclusive Patreon member content. Now, if you want additional Disney magic in your day, you need to try to check out Magic and the Mouse Radio. Magic and the Mouse Radio is the best internet radio station for all your Disney music favorites, especially this time of year, the holidays, all the Disney holiday music is coming. You need to check out Magic and the Mouse Radio. There's a link to it on our website as well, or you can go to magicandmouseradio.com. In addition to all the great music, you can hear our show on Magic and the Mouse Radio every Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday morning at 9 a.m. Eastern.
In addition to the Magic the Mouse Radio family, I am so proud to be part of the Magic the Mouse News family. MagicTheMouseNews.com has articles for anything and everything Disney related that you might want to read. So make sure you go check it out.
Yeah, please do that. You will not be disappointed. All right, we are actually recording this episode a little bit early again this week. We're actually pretty early this week. It's Wednesday, November 8th, right? 2023 as we're recording this episode. And this episode will come out on Sunday, November the 11th?
12th?
The 12th? No.
Something like that.
Tomorrow's the 9th. That's Thursday. The 10th is Friday. 11th, 12th. Yeah, so November 12th, this episode will be released. So we're recording this one a little bit early, and it is Wednesday, which means tomorrow is the big Loki season 2 finale.
That's right.
The big final episode of season 2 of Loki is tomorrow. Maybe on a scale of 1 to 10, how excited are you for Loki's season 2 finale?
I would give it a 10. I'm very excited. I've been theorizing with friends, talking about what we think is going to happen, what questions are going to be answered, what questions are going to be left remained. We're very excited. So
Loki, your excitement over the Loki season finale, how does it compare to, say, Mandalorian season finale on any of the 3 seasons Mandalorian's been out?
I don't think it parallels. I think the Mandalorian hype was not as hype as Loki is, for sure.
So you think you're more excited for the Loki finale than you were for the Mandalorian finale. So that's fair, because I know you're a big Loki fan to begin with, more than a Star Wars fan. You were more of a Marvel person.
They're also very different, right? There isn't a whole lot of mystery in the Mandalorian episodes. Right. There's not a whole lot of questions that you're hoping to be answered versus in the Loki series.
But there were some theories to see what happened and what didn't happen. And some things happened, some things didn't happen. Well, the reason I bring that up is because you don't know the topic of this week's episode, do you?
No.
Because this will be the first you're hearing of this. I've come up with this week's episode topic. Mm-hmm. And I thought it'd be interesting for you and I to have a conversation about the 2 Disney Plus series that have had more than one season. Loki is now in its 2nd season. It's the only Marvel Disney Plus series that has more than one season. It's already aired, right? I mean, I know there will be other seasons with like What If, but it hasn't aired yet.
Right.
And Mandalorian is the only Star Wars related Disney Plus series that has had multiple seasons. It's had 3 seasons.
Well, Bad Batch.
Bad Batch just had the 1 season, I think, hasn't it?
I thought
did
there
the
was
2nd season come out?
Season.
Well, I'm talking about the live action stuff, right?
Okay.
The live action stuff. So Loki and Mandalorian. We're going to talk about Loki and Mandalorian today, and we're going to go through each of these series, and we're going to have a conversation to try to determine which is the better property. What is the better show, The Mandalorian or Loki? Now, those of you who are listening out there, and of course you, Mimi, as we're having this conversation, you may have a preconceived notion of what you think the better show is. But I'd be interested to see if you have the same opinion at the end of our conversation today.
Okay.
So that's what we're going to talk about, guys. We're going to talk about the Star Wars and the Marvel live action series from Disney Plus that have had multiple seasons to find out who wins. Mandalorian versus Loki. We're going to put them in the ring and see who comes out on top. How does that sound?
Awesome.
Good. All right. So we'll have that conversation here in a second. We'll have our Disney Dad Joke of the Week. But before we get into all that, is there any other news or any other things going on that we want to share?
Yeah, I have a Disney question of the week. It's actually Disney Assembled question of the week. So my senior show, which is something that we do at my high school, is coming up. And I want to include a section of Disney Assembled highlights or favorite moments. And I tried to do it myself, but it was very difficult for me to go back through all 200 episodes and determine which ones I wanted to include clips from and which ones I didn't. So my question to you guys, and we'll put this out on the Instagram tonight and then again on Sunday, what are your favorite Disney Assembled moments? Your favorite Disney Assembled episodes? Your favorite Disney Assembled clips? If you have anything lodged in your brain, let me know so I can pull those and put them in my show.
Or maybe a guest, because we had a few guests over the last 196.
Everything Disney Assembled has ever done, including guests.
Yeah, including the guests and everything else, right? Yeah.
Let me know.
Yeah, so we'll do that. And that's a great question. So that's this week's Disney Assembled question of the week. Let Mimi know what your favorite moments are from the show so she can include it in her senior show. Good stuff. All right. Well, because it is a Wednesday night, there's school tomorrow, there's work tomorrow. We should probably jump into this episode. But before we do that, it is time for this week's Disney Dad Joke of the Week. Oh, boy. Mimi.
Yeah.
There's lots of resorts at the Walt Disney World Resort in Florida, right? There's plenty of resorts there. There's value resorts, moderate resorts, and deluxe resorts. But do you know which resort has the most boxes of Kleenex?
No.
The Polynesian.
Okay. Okay.
The Polynesian.
It was gotten
More than one Sneesian. So they had, all right.
Polynesian. Oh, yeah. I get it now.
Yeah, okay. Ladies and gentlemen.
That was funny. This week's Disney Dad Joke of the Week.
Yes.
If you have a Disney Dad joke that's better than that, send it to us, disneyassembled@gmail.com.
Or as a direct message on any of our socials, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, or Twitter X Twitter, all at Disney Assembled. All right.
Yeah. Okay,
let's jump into this week's topic. Now, let's start here. Loki has had two seasons. Right. Mm-hmm. They've had 2 seasons. Well, they're finishing their second season right now. Just for context, for a quick comparison, Loki has a Rotten Tomatoes score of 87%. That's pretty good. Mm-hmm. 87% fresh on Rotten Tomatoes. And the IMDb rating, the Internet Movie Database rating, is 8.2 out of 10. So strong, real strong. It is the number 2 most searched fantasy show on streaming today.
That's also because it's currently streaming.
What's the number 2?
What's number 1?
I don't know.
Okay.
What number 1 is. Maybe a Doctor Who thing or something. I don't know.
Game of Thrones.
Maybe. All right. The Mandalorian has a Rotten Tomatoes freshness score of 90%.
Okay.
Slightly higher. And an IMDb score of 8.7 out of 10. Now, should mention, very interesting here. And I saw this here just a second ago. It is the number 3, even though it hasn't had, it's not new episodes. It is still the number 3 most popular, most searched Western on streaming today, even though it's a space Western.
It is
it's number 3 most streamed, most searched Western in streaming. So,
I think that's a very niche category though. So right. I'm not necessarily sold on top 3 most searched Western. Like, okay,
Right.
fine.
Fair
Loki's is a little bit impressive. Number 2 most searched sci-fi fantasy, but that is probably in part due to the fact that it is currently releasing and streaming new episodes.
Fair enough. Now, let's get into this. 2 seasons versus 3 seasons. We're not going to talk about all that, right? But let's talk about this logically. Let's look at the main characters first. You have Loki. You have The Mandalorian.
I was thinking about it more broad than that.
Well, we're going to talk about it in very broad strokes, but I mean, this is a conversation. So I'll bring up a topic, you bring up a topic. We'll try to figure this out. I want to start with the main characters. Now, in terms of the acting, just the actors portraying the characters in the show, do you have an opinion about The Mandalorian, Pedro Pascal, Tom Hiddleston with Loki, who in terms of just the purely portrayal of a character on the screen?
I think Pedro Pascal does a fantastic job. It's okay. It's a very complicated sort of issue to look at, right? Because Tom Hiddleston has been in the role of Loki for 10 plus years, probably about 10 years, because Avengers 1 came out in 2013. So we're looking at 10 years this year, right? And that was Loki's major debut, really. And he has very accurately, very precisely created a character who before the series even started had a cult following. Even though he was a villain, an anti-hero, an antagonist, people loved him, and he was a very complex character. Tom Hiddleston has captured the maturity arc of Loki, the good and bad of Loki, the devil and the angel shoulder of Loki very well before the series even started. And then once the series premiered, we've only seen this hero's journey done in a way that is still very true to the character versus creating a new hero character out of that same realm, right?
Well, I would say this with the characters and the acting.
Okay, I was not done.
I'm sorry. Go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt you. Go ahead.
Whereas like Pedro Pascal has a hard job not acting, voice acting, while also doing the mannerisms of a character. Right? Like The Mandalorian Din Djarin has a very distinct characterization that we only know through his body language. And I think that that's very impressive. So I think with the acting, they're equal on par level. Both very well cast, both very well acted.
Right. They're both very acted, but I guess, so here's my take on it. From the pure acting sense, I'm going to give an edge to Tom Hiddleston because most of The Mandalorian, a lot of it is a stunt man in a costume, right? A lot of it is. And I know there's a stunt man working on Loki too. I'm not saying it, but there's no, I think Tom Hiddleston's Loki performance is a better overall acting job. Even though I agree with you, Pedro Pascal's doing a great job at Mandalorian. I'm not saying it's a bad job. I think Loki gets the edge here. But in terms of character, I think The Mandalorian has a better chance of having a longer influence than Loki, because Loki's just one of many, many characters. And I know The Mandalorian's one of many characters in Star Wars universe, but I think we're just at the beginning of The Mandalorian's sort of influence on things. And I think eventually Loki's influence on Marvel is going to fade, right? I just think at some point, Tom Hiddleston is not going to be playing Loki. You can put anybody in The Mandalorian pretty much because all you got to do is wear the helmet. I mean, I think it'd be easier to replace The Mandalorian as an actor than Loki as an actor. That's just my opinion, right? So I think in terms of character stuff, I'm going to give the edge to Loki over The Mandalorian in terms of which series do I think is a better series. I just think the main character, I think the acting, on a pure acting end, I think Loki wins. On sort of which character has a bigger future possibly in their universe, I think there's a lot of ground The Mandalorian still can cover, and Loki doesn't have as much ground to cover, I think.
I disagree. I think Loki has so much ground to cover. I think in the long run, Loki is going to be revealed as a Nexus being, because Loki is the only one that we've seen, any variant of Loki is the only one that we've seen be pretty much unaffected by everything that's happening with the TVA. And so I think that Loki is going to become a character who exists much like Wanda and has that sort of center stage role in the MCU. So I think the edge doesn't automatically go to the Mandalorian in the way that you seem to be setting it up. I think it's a competitive argument here,
right.
Because the Mandalorian, like, it's also, that show's also framed in a set time period that is very short, whereas Loki is set over the course of the entire MCU. So it's harder to take that bird's eye view. You
mentioned something a second ago that I want to follow up on about the variant thing in Loki. As far as I can recall, the Loki character is the only one we've seen on the show who has variants of himself or herself that don't exactly look like him.
Right.
Because remember when they went to the Void, they had all those different Lokis.
Right. And it was like, why?
But no other character has a variant that doesn't look exactly like them.
Right.
I mean, look at He Who Remains with the Victor. I mean, it's the same looking person, right?
Right.
Look at, Mobius, it's the same.
It's the same actor. It's the same character.
It's the same thing. So I think there may be something there.
Loki is a Nexus being. Anyway,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I think there's more to this character on Loki thing than there is to be talked about. I think that this particular category is a very hard one to differentiate the two between.
Well, let's change categories then. Let's talk about sidekicks. For Loki, I would say it's Mobius is probably the primary sidekick, right?
Right.
In Mandalorian, it's got to be Grogu, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, but even just like further than just sidekicks, like side characters in general.
Right, side characters in general, right? So
like supporting actors, supporting roles, right, antagonists. So on
Loki's side, you have Mobius, you have Sylvie,
you've got B-15, you've got Obi.
Hunter B-15, you got Obi. Okay, Obi's introduced. Right, on the Mandalorian side, you have Grogu, you've got, the fighter pilot guy that shows up here or there. I guess Grief Karga. We've got Cara Dune.
Who is that?
The woman that wasn't in season 3. The one that Disney fired.
Oh yeah. Not the ship. The ship.
No, that Bo-Katan, I guess, is a side character. Yeah, Bo-Katan.
We've got like the main Mandalorian. I don't know all their names.
So which property do you think, which show do you think has the stronger set of side characters?
I think Loki, because every single main character or side character has a personality and a motivation, whereas Mandalorian there are a lot of side characters that aren't developed as well, which I think is fine because Grogu is very well developed and the Mandalorian is very well developed and the show is very obviously centrally focused on them, whereas Loki has these. Every single character in Loki has a background, and so I think it's got to go to Loki.
I think as a group, the Loki side characters are stronger than the Mandalorian side characters. However, as an influence on pop culture currently, I would say Mandalorian has had a bigger impact with Grogu. Look at Halloween. We just had Halloween. How many Mandalorian costumes and all the Grogu gear? Your cat wants in. Okay, come on in, Sally. Hi, Sally, the cat. So I think the side characters in Loki, I agree with you, as a collective are stronger. And if you can hear the cat, I apologize.
Sorry, cat.
But
come here, baby
I think in terms of its influence on pop culture, I'd have to say Grogu is everywhere. Does that make sense to you? Grogu and Mandalorian, I guess, are new characters, and they've had a huge sort of. I don't know. Do you see what I'm saying? What is your response to that?
Grogu was a meme and a big character that got very popular when the show first started, and we've definitely felt that effect in the parks, in the merchandising, in just general sort of ticket sales and toy sales and all that. And so I would have to swing in that way because there wasn't a whole lot of like Mobius character toys being sold. As much as the adult audience of Loki loved that character, it didn't really stick with everyone the way Grogu did. So
yeah, that's fair.
I think the pop culture impact has to go to The Mandalorian, but I think that's also in part of the fact that they are new characters, right? Like Loki's pop culture impact doesn't become any bigger than it already is, I think.
And you might make the argument, some may make the argument that Star Wars as a property
is bigger than Marvel.
Has a bigger pop culture impact than Marvel
for
does.
Sure. I would definitely agree with that. Like Star Wars, like I love Marvel more than I enjoy Star Wars. Not it's anything bad towards Star Wars. I just happen to really enjoy Marvel. But the impact that Star Wars has had, like, I mean, think about the Star Wars villains. Darth Vader was like the third most popular, most iconic pop culture character of all time. You know, like there weren't Marvel characters out there like that, you know. The every year there are stormtroopers and Darth Vaders and Luke Skywalkers and Anakins and Padmes and Leias and Han Solos for Halloween.
Right.
Not every year are you getting a Hulk.
Right. No,
every year you might get an Iron Man or a Captain America, but you're not always getting a Hulk or a Black Widow. And so I think, yes, I would agree with that. Star Wars is the bigger pop culture impact.
Right. Now, some would say that the quality of a show like these two is very much determined by the quality of the villains. Let's talk about villains a little bit. In The Mandalorian, we have, what's his name? Moff Gideon.
And then we've got...
Pretty much Moff Gideon. Then, of course, they had... Yeah, it was pretty much Moff Gideon.
We've had some, like... little episodic antagonists, but
let's focus on the main villain is Moff Gideon in Mandalorian. What about in Loki? Who is it? Is it Humane?
It's Loki is the villain, right? It's like this omniscient, non-existent being is all it. Like it's the idea of running out of time. That's the villain, and I kind of like this. So interjecting for a second, I've had to write a lot of artist statements recently with being a senior and all this stuff. And I've come to learn that I really like telling stories in which there is no good guy and bad guy. Star Wars very much sticks to this sort of formula. It works really well for them because all of their villains are somehow very different and all of their heroes are very different. Whereas Marvel has very much taken to this sort of conflict within the self, conflict between the character and the world versus conflict between a good guy and a bad guy. And I think Loki has taken that and done it really well. I think Moff Gideon, although being a immediate direct figurehead for the villain of The Mandalorian, when I think about The Mandalorian, I don't think about the good guy and the bad guy. I'm thinking about the Mandalorian's inner conflict with becoming a good guy, with becoming not a bounty hunter, with loving Grogu. And I think that the quality of Moff Gideon is a very good character. He is. He's a great character, but I don't think about him the way I think about Luke versus Darth Vader when I think about that. You know what I'm saying?
Which show do you think has the greater conflict? I think Gideon, I think what we've said is Moff Gideon wins if we're saying which character is the stronger villain, because there is no really strong character villain that has emerged in Loki yet. I mean, there are people who've done bad things, but you can't really say at this point who is the big baddie.
Right. You don't know.
And in Mandalorian, it's Gideon. We all know that. Right. So if you had to name a character, Mandalorian would win that. But let's talk about the conflict, though. Which show has, I mean, because you brought up a good point here about the conflict that may not have a specific villain.
There's no figurehead to it. Which show
has the better conflict? I mean, so Loki, you have a conflict of Loki with him coming to grips with himself on who he is and what his purpose is, right? And because remember, he used to say, I am what my glorious purpose, right? I have glorious, right. But he doesn't know what his purpose is.
Not anymore.
And so his conflict is with himself,
right?
And with his place in the world and what his purpose is and time. Mandalorian, outside of his Moff Gideon, you've just mentioned, right? It's about the evolution of,
being a Mandalorian versus being a bounty hunter. Exactly. I think, though, the stakes are higher in Loki. There's a higher payoff to winning versus in The Mandalorian. I mean, like, at the current moment, I couldn't tell you what the conflict is in The Mandalorian, because for the first season, it was make sure Grogu doesn't get captured. Awesome. Great. For the second one, it was... I don't remember the second. It was like, is Grogu going to be a Jedi? But that wasn't even a conflict. That was just the dramatic question. And season 3 was very much, is Din Djarin going to become a Mandalorian again? Right. is he going to save Mandalore? Whereas with Loki, the stake is time going to fall apart? Is the universe going to end?
Right.
And I don't think you can compare them at all. The conflict and the tension in Loki is so strong because because it all intersects. Loki versus himself, Loki versus his variants, Loki versus Loki versus his world, and then Loki versus literally Miss Minutes and He Who Remains and Renslayer.
So is it fair to say that in Loki, the conflict is more compelling and more interesting than Mandalorian, but in The Mandalorian, a central character villain that you have a conflict with is more compelling?
Yeah, and I think with this season 4 setup of like what is eventually going to be the revival of Mandalore, I think we'll get a better villain. Does that make sense? Like a stronger Moff Gideon-esque character. Because they're going to war. It could be
Thrawn.
It could be Thrawn.
Right.
Well, yeah, I forgot about that. I forgot that those two things existed.
Right, because there could be some intersection back with this.
Right, and so I think that like once we get to this, I think part of the problem with Mandalorian right now is that the last season was very much a setup for the big final battle. And so there wasn't there was a lot of internal conflict to get us ready for that versus like, oh no, we got to go fight Darth Vader, Right. So, yeah.
Well, let's talk about wow moments. Like each of these series, there's some very exciting moments. There's some moments that like you look back on as like, wow, that's just been fantastic. And maybe they evoke some emotion, or maybe they evoke just some awe, like those jaw-dropping scenes and aspects of the storytelling. And when I bring this up to you, what I'm really thinking about is sort of that moment at the end of season 2 of Mandalorian, where they're on the ship, they've captured Gideon. The Gideon's dark troopers are coming to break in, and Luke Skywalker appears. And literally I was crying. Like I thought I was like, wow, absolutely wow that they did this. Obviously when Grogu first appears and you see that it's a creature that's like Yoda, that was a wow moment. We were like, oh my God, look at that. Like no one was expecting that. Or maybe, the big fight with Bo-Katan at the end of season 3 and Gideon, right? It was like a big wow moment. Well,
even like him, Din Djarin, like removing his helmet and, that, and like discovering the ancient waters of Mandalore. Like we were, there were very much moments when we were shocked. It was like watching Ahsoka and then like, oh my God, Ezra's actually alive. And
when she sees the mythosaur under the water, or when he had to remove his helmet when he was infiltrating the base and he had to do it in public, right?
The mythosaur definitely was not like a jaw-dropping moment. It was just a moment of high intensity. But like when he removes his helmet in season 1, it's like what just happened? Like, I can't believe that. But in Loki, you get so many of them too. Like, I mean,
do you? Because I can't recall moments that made me feel the same way in Loki, but maybe you can remind me of some of them.
Okay, first of all, glorious purpose, iconic line drop right there. This one's not necessarily jaw-dropping for everybody else, but Loki's confirming of his bisexuality is like a big deal, a big part of this show that was like really important.
It was a brief reference to it, right? Yeah, right.
That was really important. And then I think like when you finally get to He Who Remains and the episode ends, and then when Sylvie kills him and the whole show ends, I think that
right, and all the timelines start converging
exactly
diverging.
And then I think the other two huge jaw-dropping moments are going to be when Victor Timely turns into spaghetti, because it's like instant.
Right. Yeah, and that was kind of unexpected.
Exactly. And then when the loom explodes and the screen goes black. Right. I think those are the big ones. I think this show, like, unlike Mandalorian definitely has like moments where you can point them out. You'll be like, when Luke appears, when he removes his helmet, when blah, 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 blah.
Right.
These are very like intense moments because there's very solid high and low flow to the Mandalorian. Loki just sort of rides this high, and the high just keeps building, and the high just keeps building, and then something super intense happens, and then the high kind of comes back down, but it's still very high. There's no like tender moments there, right?
Right. Well, I guess in my mind, though, there are more consistent dramatic moments in Loki Whereas Mandalorian, like you said, it goes up and down, it goes up and down. But in my mind, though, there are more scenes that were like the wow factor scenes in Mandalorian. Because even as you're mentioning the stuff about Loki, and I agree with you, none of them are sort of standing out in my mind for me personally as, I mean, there is nothing that Loki in my mind that I have had the response to from seeing on the screen like what I experienced when Luke when that X-Wing fighter docked and you knew it was Luke and he was coming to get Grogu. That was no one talk, no one make a sound. I just want to watch this and soak it in. So it sounds like maybe Mandalorian has more wow factor, but Loki is more consistently
invigorating.
Yeah.
I definitely had that moment though when the loom was about to explode. I was like, if anybody talks right now, like I'm going to bite your head off. But I also am obsessed with Loki and I want to soak in as much of it as I possibly can.
So we've had a lot of conversation about the two different shows. What other factors
the main one that
stand out to you?
Sorry, I truly cut you off. The first one that my mind jumped to when you introduced the topic 30 minutes ago was quality. Not like nitty gritty quality, but like, well, no, yes, nitty gritty quality, not like general quality because they're both multi-million-dollar budgets. They're both made with high-tech studios. They're both incredible productions. But I was thinking more about like overall capturing of tone, overall capturing of character, overall capturing of setting. This goes down to music choice, lighting choice, costume choice, things like that.
Let's talk about music. Which one do you think has better music?
I think the Loki theme song and the Mandalorian theme song are both iconic things that I can hear and I can sympathize with them. The Loki theme song was used in a show I was in because we were so obsessed with this show. But the music that is used consistently throughout the Mandalorian like is unmatched compared to the the Loki soundtrack can't compare like at all.
Right.
It's not on the same level. I think the Mandalorian, I think Star Wars in general utilizes music in a way that Marvel does not. Versus Guardians of except for Guardians of the Galaxy, right? They use music very, very well. Whoever's working on those movies should be working on all the movies. But I think the Mandalorian, like, come on.
I think consistently Mandalorian music is probably slightly better than the music in Loki, even though I love the music in Loki. But one thing I would say is I love how the music for the intro changes for Loki based on the time period or the theme of that week, like the little Marvel logo when it comes in. I like how they do that changes. Here's a question I had. It might be a good one. Which show do you think has done more for the cinematic universe that it exists in other words, of expanding storytelling, of expanding it out, of creating additional interest in, like, does Mandalorian have a bigger impact on the Star Wars universe, or has Loki made a bigger impact on the MCU?
I think this is a loaded question because we don't know what the Loki impact is yet. It's the main complaint of everything MCU related right now. Nothing connects, nothing makes sense. And I think in the long run, I'm going to say, if we revisit this in like 3 years, I'm going to say Loki. But at this current moment in time, it's got to be The Mandalorian. Everything in Loki at the current moment feels so standalone. It doesn't connect to anything else we've seen in the movies. It doesn't connect to anything else we've seen in any of the other shows. It's just standalone. It's just a story. It doesn't feel like anything else. Versus The Mandalorian has got Thrawn and Ahsoka and Luke and a new Jedi and the Mandalore and Mandalorians and this side of the Star Wars universe that hadn't really been explored.
Yeah, I think Loki will have an influence on the MCU, but I think it'll be contained. I think Mandalorian has expanded what people saw as sort of the Star Wars universe significantly. Now we're at brand new planets, brand new parts of the galaxy. It has really taken, in my mind, it's taken this core universe that's centered around the Skywalker saga and a little bit of the Rey piece afterwards.
Not even, but yeah.
And has really given you a whole new basic universe that ties into that. And I think Mandalorian has probably done more to expand the Star Wars universe than Loki has. But I do agree with you. We don't know the extent to how Loki is expanding the MCU because we don't know its connections yet. But I think Mandalorian has more of a chance
immediate impact
to be significantly impactful on that stuff.
Because I don't think Mandalorian's going to add anything to the lore. I don't think it's going to relieve any mysteries that we might have. It's just going to tell a really good story about a really specific moment in time, and I can't complain about that.
What else do you want to maybe explore as we're getting about 37 minutes into this episode? I mean,
I kind of want to shift gears a little bit into my Loki fan theory going into the last episode.
Yeah, you want to share some of those?
Yeah, let me just... So now that we've discussed, it's time to talk about lore. What I find incredibly interesting that I cannot seem to shake is what you said about how you think everything is He Who Remains' plan. And I took this and I developed it and I said, what are the plot holes? How can I make this make sense? So here's what I got. Here's what I got, ladies and gentlemen. And it all comes back to one little detail from episode I said I was about to say 3 and I held it before. That was so embarrassing. 3. Okay. When Obi and Victor Timely meet, they look at each other and they say, wow, you inspired my work. How does that make any sense? Obi couldn't write the TVA timeline without Victor Timely's work, and Victor Timely couldn't make his work without Obi's handbook. Fine, great, I'll buy that. However, the TVA handbook canonically exists before the death of He Who Remains. From the very first episode of season 1, episode 1, Loki, TVA handbook on the desk. However, Victor Timely could not exist if He Who Remains hadn't been killed by Sylvie. The only reason he exists is because his temporal aura got shot back into the loom and spread out across all these things. So, I think the proof that goes into your theory that this is all a big plan of He Who Remains is that Victor Timely literally has to exist for the TVA to exist, and Victor Timely cannot exist unless He Who Remains is killed by Sylvie. Expanding on this a little bit. I think the overall theory is that it's a big loop. I think Loki is going to spend a lot of time building back the TVA, trying to make it really exist again, and is going to inadvertently invent it because it doesn't exist anymore, right? And because of the way time works in this universe, that's it. Like, it doesn't exist, period.
Right.
The only thing I'm struggling to come to terms with is how does it get into the hands of Renslayer and He Who Remains in just minutes? Because if Loki does and always has invented the TVA, where do those 3 characters come into play? 2. What is the purpose of a TemPad? What does it do, Papa? Can you explain for me so I can drop this bomb on you?
It allows you to jump between time periods.
You know what else allows you to jump between time periods? The Avengers, when they went back in time and stole all the Infinity Stones. Did we forget about that, Marvel? Because I think we did. If the Avengers are allowed to go back in time, which they did, at the beginning of Loki ended up in the TVA as a variant because he didn't get the Tesseract. Because the Avengers took it from him when they went back in time. It was supposed to happen. Like, the Avengers had to go back in time so Loki could lose the Tesseract, so Loki could get sent to He Who Remains, and and then it snowballs, right? So He Who Remains can die, so Victor Timely can exist, so the TVA can exist, whatever. Okay. The thing that is really getting me is, where did those 3 characters come in? And 2, why would He Who Remains create a timeline, a time loop, in which he just dies? He doesn't have any power in the end. And so I think in the long run, I'm not sure if we're going to see this tomorrow, but I think in the long run, what we're going to see is Loki sitting at the end of time. I think we're going to reveal Loki as a Nexus being who is unaffected by the manipulation of He Who Remains, which would explain why he has so many different kinds of variants. And I think he is going to become the god of stories and take the spot at the end of time.
Yeah, I'd be happy to see that. What I do think is that my theories on Loki is that, number one, Loki, they've mentioned this a few times, Loki always loses. So I don't think the episode is going to have what we would consider, I don't want to say a happy ending, but I doubt very seriously there's going to be any hard conclusions. I think something will be resolved, but it'll lead to a brand new thing that we don't know
I agree.
is going to happen. Like there'll be a big shocker ending type thing. I don't think Victor Timely is a long-term character. I think even if Loki keeps going back and trying to redo the thing, I don't think Victor Timely is the key. I think there's other He Who Remains variants that Loki's going to have to deal with.
I definitely don't think Victor Timely is like the end all be all. He's just a little piece of evidence that can support my theory.
I think I said this last week. I think Loki is being used as a pawn by the real baddie who needed He Who Remains to be disposed of. Like some entity is pulling all these strings and knows everything that was happening is going to happen. I wouldn't be surprised if, a main character dies off in this last episode, whether it's Hunter B-15 or I don't know if it'll be Obi or Mobius. I don't know. I wouldn't be surprised if it ends up being like Obi has a variant that was, I don't know, in some way evil or something like that. But I think what's unclear is we're trusting that Miss Minutes was also telling Renslayer the truth right. and I'm not so sure you can trust what Miss Minutes was saying.
Exactly.
So I don't think we really know. I think Loki's being used as a pawn. I think Loki's not going to win, but I think he'll feel like he accomplished something. But in the background, there's always somebody else or something else really manipulating behind the scenes. And we might get a glimpse of who or what that is. Maybe it's Kang the Conqueror. Maybe it's another villain. Maybe it's whatever.
It wouldn't surprise me if out of the blue it was a character or a variant of Wanda. And I know that sounds really ridiculous, but Loki's not confirmed a Nexus being. That's just something that I've been theorizing. But Wanda is. Wanda Maximoff, the Scarlet Witch, is a Nexus being. She is untouched by the hands of time. She is untouched by the hands of space. She is the most powerful creature in literally every dimension, everything. She is more powerful than Kang the Conqueror. She's more powerful than Loki. She's more powerful than Agatha. She is literally been described as the most powerful figure to ever exist. She can't die. Can't die.
I saw something today that somebody at Marvel put out that no, Wanda did die at the end of Multiverse of Madness.
She didn't.
That she's gone.
Wanda can't die.
I think that version of Wanda did. Like you said, she's a Nexus being.
Right. Her variant is the exact same.
Yeah, there are versions of her in other universes that could certainly emerge. Do you think there's going to be any new character introduced in this last episode to help sort of in the story? I don't. I think we're just going to, I think any theory that includes some surprise character showing up, I don't think that's going to happen.
If Wanda shows up though, I might lose my mind. My main question is, one of my questions that is really, really bugging me right now is, in Doctor Strange, we talked a lot about multiverses and jumping between multiverses and blah, 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 blah. Are multiverses different dimensions? And if they aren't, if multiverses aren't dimensions, do they all exist on the sacred timeline together, or are they different branched timelines? If they are different dimensions, do those dimensions have to run on the sacred timeline, or do they have their own sort of time thing? How do we make space and time make sense? Connect space and time, Marvel, please. Give us a Loki Wanda coffee shop date. Have them spill. Have them debrief. Because someone needs to just sit down and explain to me how it makes sense. Because if multiverses are the same as branched timelines and jumping between them is the same as jumping between timelines, America Chavez is a human tempad. She's about to die. I mean, so they're about to go after her if they discover this. Right? So make it make sense. Yeah. That's my theory. Well,
we'll find out tomorrow night because, like I said, we're recording this on Wednesday. Tomorrow night, Thursday night is the Loki season 2 finale. Maybe we'll get some of the answers to your questions. Ladies and gentlemen, what do you think? What's the better series, Loki or Mandalorian? Do you agree with our opinions? Do you not agree with our opinions? Mimi, how can they let us know?
Yeah, so you guys can send us an email, DisneyAssembled@gmail.com, or send us a message on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, all at Disney Assembled. But if you guys want to support the show further, link to our TeePublic, Patreon, Buy Us a Dole Whip, and all that other fun stuff is on our website, DisneyAssembled.com. Make sure you go check it out.
Yeah, please do that. And visit our YouTube channel, youtube.com/DisneyAssembled. If you haven't done so already, hit that subscribe button and the little bell icon. So you get notified every time we post a new video there. And of course, the best thing you can do is share the show with your friends, either on your social networks or just tell them about it at your place of work or school. And if you haven't done so already, we would greatly appreciate your consideration of leaving a very kind rating and review on your podcast player of choice. If you haven't subscribed to the show on your podcast player of choice, hit that subscribe button. It's free, and you'll be happier for it. All right, Mimi, high five. Good episode this week. Man, we got this done early. We'll get it out on Sunday for everybody to listen to, and hopefully they'll enjoy it.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us. We hope this episode brought a smile to your face, some little extra magic to your day, and that important sprinkle of pixie dust to your week. And until next time,
see you real soon.
Ladies and gentlemen, please collect your belongings, watch your head and step, and take small children by the hand.